All right, hello, citizens of the Nigelverse. It is Nigel here once again. You know, there are some things in life that just weren't meant to happen, and and maybe this is one of them. And so, for years, one of the biggest what ifs when it comes to the world of pro wrestling is Undertaker versus Sting. Of, two of perhaps the most iconic wrestlers of all time in two very different promotions and having kind of interesting slash like similar trajectories leading to them becoming the faces of their respective company. Of course, Sting and definitely in a lot of ways the face of WCW. Meanwhile, The Undertaker in a lot of ways the face of WWE. Oh, hey, among many faces of WWE. But for years, fans speculated when these two would meet up and lock up in the ring, when these two would face off. And it seemed like every time the chance came where we would finally get our Undertaker versus Sting encounter, we didn't quite get it. And maybe that wasn't without reason. So today I want to ask the question and seek to answer the question: was Undertaker versus Sting ever truly meant to happen? And if so, what would it have looked like? And this is coming about. Admittedly, this is a video I wanted to do for a little bit, but I think this mainly also came about because of Sting's recent retirement, and now what's some news that seemingly emerged earlier today. So, of course, Sting retired back at Revolution earlier this month. AEW Revolution, that is. Go check out my review of AEW Revolution if you haven't already. But and Undertaker also made the joke saying that he would have came out of retirement to fight Sting, but now Sting's retired, so now both of them are retired. So the match not happening. But now apparently the report is coming out, and you know what? I'm gonna see if I can find the exact verbiage of it to see if I can get an exact quote. But apparently, Vince McMahon didn't want to do Undertaker versus Sting, and which why would you not want to? Who who and looks like we have a quote here. This is courtesy of SEScoops.com. And this is, I guess, an excerpt from the Undertaker talking about saying, in regards to Undertaker versus Sting, saying it just didn't work out. He had a short run in WWE, and Vince didn't want it for whatever reason. I don't know what it was. He didn't feel it. Everyone else was clamoring for this match for quite a few years. A year or two into the character change, I mean, people were already sending me artwork with the billboard or the poster. It just never worked out. The match would have been good, but I don't think it would have lived up to the expectations that people have for it. People always think about things in a certain sense. I think they thought in their mind of Undertaker 2007 or 2008 versus Sting. It was later on than that. I can say I was way on the backside of what I was going to do when he got there. So, Undertaker does bring up a very good point that we will get to. But I also wanted to bring that up to show Vince not really being interested in booking that match. Like that's the part that a lot of people ran with. But Undertaker also kind of echoing some similar sentiments and saying maybe it probably wouldn't have worked out. But that is interesting. I do find it interesting that Vince wouldn't want to book that match. That's like it is very interesting. It's not surprising, considering who we're talking about here, that being Vince McMahon, but it is interesting because Undertaker and Sting is the dream match, like the dream match to end all dream matches. We've talked. Well, first of all, we talked about dream matches on the channel here before a little while ago, way back when. If you haven't already, go check out that video. But also, we've like within the wrestling community have a lot of dream matches that we talk about, or matches that we would have loved to have seen at some point. Some matches we still would like to see at some point, but this Undertaker versus Sting was the dream match. And as I alluded to before in my dream matches video, it's technically happened. Sting faced Mean Marcellus and I believe it was WCW or maybe shortly before WCW where they fought, but they've definitely fought before. But it wasn't the Sting or Undertaker that we quite knew. That was Sting, he was still very much like Surfer Sting with the blonde hair and everything, and, versus Mean Marcellus, who was nowhere near quite the Undertaker just yet. Which, speaking of which, I did a tier list on the Undertaker on a Sunday. If you haven't already, go check out that video. A lot of videos for you guys to check out. How it is WrestleMania season after all, and this is definitely a WrestleMania dream match, but yeah, it never truly materialized. And it's interesting how we got. I mentioned we had gotten close. Apparently, the rumor was in 2011 that the Visionettes that were for the Undertaker or to challenge Triple H to the No Holds Barred match at WrestleMania 27. Apparently, if if the rumor is true, sorry, I dropped my phone. If the rumors are true, if the rumors are to be believed, those were originally meant for Sting, and I imagine it would have been for Sting to battle the Undertaker, and but ultimately Sting. I think this was when Sting, his contract with TNA had expired or was about to expire, but then he renewed his contract with TNA, so he ended up sticking with TNA after all. And I've made this joke multiple times before, but it bears repeating. Then the match at Victory Road happened with Jeff Hardy in 2011. Yay! But yeah, so that was a close call. If that is the case, then that definitely was close. But we had an even closer call, and that was when Sting did come into WWE. Granted, in the grand scheme of things, Sting ultimately spent a cup of coffee in WWE. He only about a year or so. He debuted at Survivor Series 2014, helping Team Ziggler take down the Authority. And you may be wondering, Nigel, did you make a video about that as well? Well, I'm glad you asked. Of course I did. Check out my review of Team Cena versus Team Authority at Survivor Series 2014. But Sting made his debut there, and took down the Authority, or tried battling the Authority. But even then, and I didn't quite see it as much, but apparently that was the case. A lot of people were wondering, okay, cool, he's in. Now, when's he fighting The Undertaker? Well, the answer, not at WrestleMania. I think that's one of the things that people will highlight as to why Sting and WWE didn't really work out, is that instead of giving us the dream match, finally giving us the dream match, the match we all wanted to see, in Sting versus The Undertaker. Instead, The Undertaker fought Bray Wyatt. Not a bad build, of course, on the part of Bray Wyatt. But although that's a given, considering exactly who Bray Wyatt was, of course, RIP to him. And of course, I'm going to talk about, and I'm slated to talk about this more on Saturday for System Shock Radio. But the new documentary he has coming out is looking really interesting so far. But nevertheless, we did get Bray Wyatt versus The Undertaker, which I guess was supposed to be a passing of the torch to Wyatt, but didn't really, considering The Undertaker won that match. Although I imagine they probably didn't want Undertaker losing twice in a row, because the previous year he lost. The streak officially ended at the hands of Brock Lesnar. But meanwhile, Sting got Triple H in pretty much a this isn't WCW versus WWE, but it kind of is sort of storyline, and that a lot of people felt was kind of a disservice. And then from there, Sting didn't interact with the Undertaker, instead kind of continuing his feud with the Authority, including facing, and this is what ultimately led to his retirement for the time being, at least until he came into AEW. Sting battling Seth Rollins for the WWE Championship, of course, Sting suffered his shoulder injury, which caused him to retire at the hands of the buckle bomb, which I'm not blaming Seth for. Accidents happen, of course, but yeah, I remember Seth got a lot of heat after that, for that moment with Sting having to retire and his run in WWE ultimately being cut short. But apparently, what if I told you who that had? It may have been, and again, the cards, because as now how there was another rumor saying that WrestleMania 32 was when we were going to have our Undertaker versus Sting. Undertaker versus Sting match. Apparently, uh, he started going around that with a lot of changes to WrestleMania 32. One of them was Undertaker versus Sting, where we finally get a match. But of course, WrestleMania 32, in a lot of people's eyes, probably, well, not only one of the worst WrestleManias of all time, but one of the most cursed WrestleManias of all time in terms of just how many people got injured, how many people had to be taken off the card, and then what we got as the end result. And a lot of stuff got moved around because of that. And I imagine if Sting was to face The Undertaker, I imagine his shoulder injury, I imagine definitely derailed those plans. But it seemed like even the powers that be, some kind of supernatural force didn't want Sting versus Undertaker to take place. But now we get into the question: what would Undertaker versus Sting have looked like if they faced off? If Sting had indeed faced the Undertaker, if we finally got the Undertaker versus Sting match we wanted and had hoped to get. And what would it have looked like? Would it have been the absolute 5-star classic? Would it have been a disappointment? My answer is honestly probably somewhere in the middle. And kind of going back to what Undertaker was talking about, out here saying that things were different. Like he brought up how people, when they expected Undertaker for a Sting, they're expecting like 2007, 2008 Undertaker, which Undertaker in 2007, 2008 could still go. Man, like 2007, 2008, those were some really solid times for the Undertaker, I must say. But that was on Undertaker, but could still go. But sadly, slowly over the years, Undertaker wasn't quite as mobile in the ring, couldn't really go as well, which is natural because that's life. That's how nature works. Over time, your body starts to break down, and so Undertaker's body especially started to break down over the years, especially by the time we got to him versus Brock Lesnar. Like that was definitely evidence A through Z of that, which is unfortunate. But being in the business for so many years, being like one of the top guys, essentially like the essentially one of like the being like one of the top one of the top figures. I should say. I think that's the terminology I want to use. It was one of the top forces. I guess is what I'm looking for in terms of wording. I mean, not exactly, but I think it'll do. One of like the top forces in WWE for so long, especially in that business, that being pro wrestling and everything. It breaks you down over time, and it definitely broke the Undertaker down to the point where, excuse me, in his later WrestleMania matches, wasn't quite as mobile. Wasn't able to put on as good a performance. He still put on some decent performances, like his matches against Triple H, his match against CM Punk. But yeah, over time, Sting still for the most part are able to go, especially some of the stuff he got up to in AEW. But I think with those two factors combined, I don't think it would have lived up to the hype. Now, granted, the hype of the match itself, like that dream match, it'd be very, very hard for that match to live up to the hype. Very rarely do matches live up to the hype, and it seems like even more rarely sometimes do matches even try to live up to the hype. But sometimes the hype is just so big that the match will have no choice but to fall under. Not necessarily fail, not necessarily be bad. I don't know if it would have been necessarily a bad match between The Undertaker and Sting, but it probably wouldn't have been the 5-star legendary classic that the legend surrounding it is. Like a match of that magnitude, a match so many people have been talking about for years, the dream match, the definitive dream match that everybody wanted to see, that everybody's been talking about for years, that's been the topic of discussion for years, that people wanted to see. That's a big, big, big task to live up to. That's a very high bar to live up to. So if you fall under, it's going to crash and burn. Like, hey, there's been dream matches that have happened that definitely haven't lived up to the hype, unfortunately. But Goldberg versus Brock Lesnar. At least the first one. WrestleMania 33 was a bit more their speed and everything, but that first one at WrestleMania 20 didn't quite live up to the hype. Hey, but yeah, matches like that where there's so much build, so much hype. A lot of people wanting to see this match. So many people wanted to see this match. Like, hey, for the match, like if the match were to fail, even a little, if it were to like crash and burn, that would have been horrible. But even if it was still like okay or just good or decent, it wouldn't have been enough to it wouldn't have been enough to live up to the high bar that the legend of the match surrounds it. Like the legend of the match is so big that the match itself probably wouldn't have lived up to it. And that's not a knock against the Undertaker or Sting. Like if this was during the '90s, if this was his '90s Crow Sting versus '90s he's not even just Mortician Undertaker, but like Attitude Era, Dark Side Undertaker, maybe even Ministry of Darkness Undertaker. I think it probably would have reached a lot closer to that legend. But then again, the legend was still building at that time, and nowhere near as big as it was in later years. But it probably wouldn't have had as high a hurdle to cross. Excuse me. But like later on, as the legend grew, as we got closer and closer to that match with Sting not with Sting's contract expiring in TNA, with Undertaker still for the most part able to go, with Sting and Undertaker finally being in the same company for the first time ever, or I should say the first time in a long time that is his, but with them being in the same company for the first time, I'm that's a pretty tall task, and Undertaker and Sting definitely would have had a tall task ahead of them. It's so tall a task that it might not have been able to live up to it, and I think that's the thing about the match that like a lot of people are now saying, oh, this match should have happened. Oh, I wish the match happened. Like it would have been interesting to see the match happen. I'm sure it definitely would have drew like with the proper build. A lot of the match does build itself, but even more the proper build, having the interactions between the two, I think like there would have been interest generated in it. Like people definitely would have been interested in that match, but I don't know if it would have reached up to the legend. But I think it would have been interesting, like if built up perfectly, if done really well. I think it would have been a very interesting match. In fact, I'll say this: this might be very controversial, and I might lose a number of people saying this, but I will say it. Not only would I have had the match happen, like I still probably would have had the match happen, even if it probably didn't live up to it. I'm sure it still would have been a solid match, but not only would I have had the match happen, I would have had Sting break the streak. Yeah, I said it. I would have had Sting be the one to break the Undertaker streak. The one person that Undertaker hadn't faced yet, the one person that a lot of people wanted him to face. He's someone whose legend was just as big as the Undertaker's. No offense to the other people who throughout the legendary streak. Of course, the streak is just as good as the opponents, and of course the man himself, that being the Undertaker. But having Sting, a man who's kind of eluded the Undertaker for years, and it's not like eluded as in like ducking him or anything, but more so they never faced off. Finally getting to face off and having Sting finally be the one, I don't think that too many people would have been upset at that. Like especially with Sting coming in like for the people who didn't really watch WCW, who like getting more of their introduction to Sting, and you build Sting up in a big way and then have him go from there. And and maybe we'll talk about. In fact, we probably will talk about who do I think should have beaten the streak. We definitely will. We'll do that next week though. Um, but yeah, uh, um, yeah, yeah. So the legend of the match, I think the match itself probably wouldn't have reached up to the legend, but it still would have been interesting to see. But What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below your thoughts. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please do me a favor: like, comment, subscribe, share with your friends, turn on post notifications so you know every time I upload a video so you can see as soon as it drops. And let me know in the comments below your thoughts on what we talked about in this discussion video. And what do you think? Do you think Undertaker vs. Sting would have been a good match? Do you think it would have been a bad match? Do you think it would have lived up to the hype? Do you think it would have fallen below it? And do you think they should have pulled the trigger on it when they had the chance? Like, hey, me personally, I'd say yeah. Like, hey, don't get me wrong, nothing against Bray Wyatt, of course, RIP, of course, but Undertaker versus Sting. If there was any time to do it, WrestleMania 31 definitely was the time to do it. But nevertheless, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you guys later. Peace.